Wow, a whole new Doctor. I wonder if people are going to like this new series. Wonder if people are going to like what they do with it. Let's see. Hi guys, welcome to my review of Power of the Daleks. This is going to be an audio-only review, which means it's going to be a black screen and just have my voice. If you like, you might put my voice on in the background while you do something else, if that's what you want to do. Also, I'm in a room that has a little bit of bric-a-brac on the floor, so if I bump into something and it thumps, please don't let that scare you. But this is also going to be an announcement I'm going to make right now before I get into my review, which is I'm planning to review every single episode from the Patrick Troughton era. I'm a classic Who fan, and I've seen all of the Jon Pertwee era. That's the only classic era I've seen all of. And I'm a big fan of Jon Pertwee as the third Doctor. He's basically my favorite Doctor, full stop. But I haven't seen most of the Patrick Troughton era. That is because most of the Patrick Troughton era is missing. However, we live in an era now with the internet being the way it is. Every Doctor Who episode has been digitized in one form or another. The episodes that are not missing are available on services like BritBox. You can watch those. You can download them on streaming usually via paid services like iTunes and Amazon. So those you can get there. And on Audible and stuff like that, you can get the Doctor Who episodes that have had audio reconstructions. And there are also animations available in various formats either on those services or they're also available on Blu-ray and DVD and that kind of thing. So every episode of the Patrick Troughton era you can see in one form or another. And for that reason, I have decided to go through and review all of them. And I'm excited for this. And I'm starting with this first story, Power of the Daleks. And if you know anything about missing Classic Who episodes, this is probably the Classic Who episode that it's most unfortunate to be missing, because you really wish you could see this one. It's Patrick Troughton's first outing. It's the first regeneration story, and it is the first Dalek story of the Patrick Troughton era. And it's got a lot of really good action in it as well. And I have to tell you guys, before I get into this review, I have seen Power of the Daleks more times than probably all of the other Patrick Troughton era episodes combined, simply because I like it, and I've listened to it slash watched it quite a few times. So this is not going to be a blind review. But I have to tell you, I was able to get the 2020 version of the DVD, which actually is a British DVD. The 2020 version of Power of the Daleks has an improved animation, and if you have VLC on your computer, you can put it in your PC and watch it with VLC. Otherwise, it's not going to work on your American DVD player, unfortunately, but I was able to watch it, and I gotta say, this animation is better. In fact, I have a separate video, which I think I've already posted, which is just a review of, like, this special edition of Power of the Daleks. But here I'm going to be reviewing more so the story, and I'm going to reference the fact that this is animated and some of the particular attributes of the animation, because, of course, that is highly relevant. So I have to tell you, the first way I actually saw this story was the 2016 animation. And to this day, I still kind of wish I would have started with the linking narration audio version that was released on CD and iTunes and Audible and that kind of thing. I wish I would have started with that, because I find that when I start with an animation and then I try to listen to it on audio later, I have a really hard time not picturing the animation. But I have to say, just story-wise, and I'm going to talk about the actual efforts of the animators and stuff in a second, because I have a lot of respect for those people. But talking just about the story, this is good. I do wish it would have been a 4-parter instead of a 6-parter, but that can't really be helped. I mean, Doctor Who, I think, had a quota of episodes, so some episodes are going to get stretched to 6. I just wish this would have been a 4-parter. But it still moves very tightly. And if you watch the animation first, you might not know that, because even in the improved animation, there's a lot of dead space that can make it seem like the episode's not going very fast, but it really is. This story starts with the first Doctor regenerating into the second Doctor. Of course, at the time it wasn't called regeneration, it was called renewal, and the Doctor said it was part of the TARDIS. So basically it made it seem like the TARDIS reversed the Doctor's age and made him younger again. Very different form, but a lot of the elements are there. sort of the post-regeneration madness, the companions not really knowing what's going on, not knowing if they're going to accept this new doctor. That stuff is there, and it's fascinating. The regeneration itself that we see in the beginning was a leftover from the end of the 10th planet with the first Doctor, but it's basically just the first Doctor's face fading to white, and then you unfade into Patrick Troughton's face. But you do get this interesting morphing effect in the middle of the episode when he looks in the mirror, and it goes, and you see like the transition between their faces, so that's pretty cool. But the mystery in the beginning of this thing is so good. They're in the TARDIS, and Ben's saying, he doesn't even act like him, and Polly's saying, it is the Doctor, I know it is. And he's going around looking through the Doctor's things and going, oh look, the Doctor was an amazing collector, wasn't he? And they're like, well, you are the Doctor. And, there's a great line where they say, who are we? And the Doctor goes, don't you know? It's just, he's got the sass, he's got the charm. He's going through the things, he's playing the recorder, stomping around, and he's looking at this 500-year diary. It's really kind of pushing into this mystery here. And one of my favorite things about the story, too, is it switches a lot between very serious moments and very comedic moments. You have, in the same scene, this moment where the Doctor is looking at this 500-year diary and just kind of walking around this mercury pool area and just going, and then he looks around and realizes that he's accidentally walked around all of these pools unscathed, and he goes, and then looks down and he's like, oh, because his shoes are in a pool of mercury. He's stepped in one as he's stopped. Like, it's just really funny. He's testing out his new legs, jumping over boulders. So this stuff that is in the scene, and it's really funny, and then someone just gets shot in that same scene. It's this examiner that's there, and he gets shot, and the Doctor basically takes this guy's badge and uses it to disguise himself. So that's dark. But at the same time, you've got this funny thing happening in this mercury pool area. And they're choking on this mercury gas. It sounds like it might give you whiplash, but it's actually pretty engaging, I think. They go into this colony, and there's this vessel there, and the Daleks are in this vessel. And there's this scientist named Lesterson, who's one of my favorite classic Who characters. He doesn't really come back in any other stories, but his characterization here is fascinating. And he's a three-dimensional character as well, because this capsule has the Daleks in it, and Lesterson's saying, oh, I'm interested in this thing. It's got this cool metal on it, and I'm going to use this for all these advancements. And the Doctor is playing this examiner, and he's going in there and he's looking at these Daleks. And they realize that Lesterson has already been in there, because they open this thing up, and Lesterson says he's amazed by these things, and he didn't even look at him when they went in. He let his guard down and didn't play his part, and they realize that he has been lying to them, and that there's other Daleks here. But there are 3 Daleks right now in the story. There's also a really funny moment where the Doctor and Polly are in their room talking about how they need to make Lesterson listen, because he's not paying attention or he's not giving the Doctor any credibility when he's saying, hey, these things are dangerous and they will kill you. But the Doctor and Polly are talking about them, and they're like, we can't make Lesterson listen, Lesterson listen, Lesterson listen, and they keep saying that amongst themselves and like bobbing their heads together. And it's just a cute little moment. So as I said, there's a lot of humor going around here. What I really like about this story is it seems very realistic in the pacing. It doesn't really seem like any characters suddenly start doing things because the plot needs to happen. And unfortunately, for people who aren't as used to this, and maybe even me the first time I watched it, it can be a little bit sluggish. But I'm really convinced that when you watch this, every single character, what they're doing, what their motivation is, seems to make sense the whole time. So I mentioned Lesterson. So here's what I love about Lesterson. He's lying to the Doctor, who is calling himself the Examiner. But the reason I don't mind that, the reason why I don't really think that makes him an annoying character, is because Lesterson has no reason to trust this person. He's a scientist first, and he really wants to make sure that he can work for the good of his own colony. And here comes this person who says, "These things are dangerous, I know what they are," and Lesterson knows these things have been in this capsule forever. He knows they've been in this capsule for a really long time, so he has no reason to think that this examiner knows what he's talking about. And he slowly starts to realize what's going on. There's this excellent subplot here where this character does something so dirty. Her name is Janely. She does this thing that's so bad and wrong, which is Lesterson is working on this lab experiment with these Daleks, and because they're the Daleks, one of his techs gets killed. But she doesn't tell him at the time that he gets killed. She basically just says, "Oh, he was injured and he's fine." That has two purposes. Number one, Janely wants to make sure these Daleks are still developed so they can use them for the revolution, because Janely is part of the rebels, as is Bragan, who's another hothead there. So she makes sure that Lesterson keeps working on these Daleks, but she realizes also that she can use that as blackmail if he ever tries to stop the Daleks from being worked on. And she actually does that later. He says, "I think the doctor's right." Lesterson starts to get scared by what the doctor's saying, and she basically says, "You know, you were responsible for Resno's death." I think it was Resno. And he's like, "Oh no, you should have told me." And there's also this manipulation plot going on where they realize that Bragan is the one who killed the other examiner. And the doctor is basically saying, "Hey, well, you're the one who killed the examiner," and the examiner and Lesterson's like, "Yeah," or not Lesterson, sorry, but in Bragan's like, "Yeah, well, you're the one who impersonated him, and I can prove that you impersonated him, and you can't prove that I killed the other guy." And earlier they kind of have this stalemate, and later Bragan kind of has this thing over him, and then he turns him in, and the doctor gets arrested and has to let himself go. A little bit of that back and forth you get in some classic Who stories where they're released and then captured again, but not really much here. He really only gets captured one time. But I'm saying all that to say that the manipulation that the characters use on one another, some of it is emotional because of, for example, what Janely does to Lesterson. You really feel like these are characters who have motivations when the camera is not on them. And coming back to what this does to Lesterson, he really starts to lose grip on reality because he cannot tell anyone what's happening with the Daleks, but he goes into the vessel and witnesses them building more of themselves. And it's this horrifying scene where they're in this like factory type thing and they're shocking these new Dalek embryos and they're like wriggling all around and they're putting them in these cases and they're going around being like, "Dalek 1 complete, Dalek 2 complete." And Lesterson is like, "Oh no." And the reason he even goes in here, I think the moment where he really starts to break is where the doctor said the Daleks can do anything given the right materials, and the Daleks are asking him for all these materials over and over again. And the doctor and Ben and Polly realize that there's more Daleks than just 3, and he goes back and witnesses this. And at this point, when he realizes that this is his fault and there's nothing he can really do about it, that's when he starts to freak out into panic. And when his panic is not met with any solution, and at the end when the Daleks go around and actually start killing people because Bragan takes over, and by the way, Bragan kills the governor in like a really brutal scene where he's just like, "Are you on my side?" And the governor's like, "No," and he's like, "Well, okay then." And then he has the Dalek take him out just in cold blood, and it's so disturbing. And then after all these slaughters start to take place, Lesterson, he's kind of made himself resigned, and he's just kind of staring off and saying all these things in this semi-floaty state and just saying, "Oh, Daleks, they're the new species. If you want to know that, you should ask them." And it makes sense, and it's sad at the end because he actually gets killed by the Daleks because he's like, "I want to serve you now, you wouldn't kill me." And they're like, "Yes, you gave us life." And then they just kill him, and it's like, oh man. It's like Lesterson, it would have been so easy to have Lesterson be like the villain and the idiot character who just won't listen to any reason. But what makes Lesterson so tragic is you understand his motivations, and at no point is he a villain, at no point is he malicious. He's just trying to get on with his work. He doesn't think the examiner knows what he's talking about. And then after he sees this, happening, he tries to stop it. He tries to shut it down. So he's actually not an evil character or anything, but he still falls victim to this because it's a mixture of the Daleks' manipulation and his own ambition that really does him in the end, and it's really unfortunate. And in episode 6, this story does finally have its Stephen... I shouldn't say finally. I don't know why I said... I think I said finally because it's episode 6 and at the end, and it's the finale. But the episode has, rather, its Stephen King moment. And its Stephen King moment is when there are all these bodies just strewn across the hallway, and there's this really creepy horror music playing, and the camera is just going around the hallway as the Daleks are just going around and looking at all the dead bodies and just rolling along the corridors. Oh, it's so creepy. It might be one of the most frightening Doctor Who moments, because before that you have all of these people in this battle, and they're firing these guns, and it is very intense when they're all going through there and firing the guns and getting shot down by the Daleks. It is pretty disturbing when that's happening. But after all that constant noise, and then you get Bragan in the office trying to call the units and tell them, hey, please come here, we need this, and none of the units are responding, and they basically decide, even the Doctor decides at the end to sacrifice one of the units of guards so he can distract the Daleks. It's dark stuff, but even after that, you get this slow pan and this just really creepy 1960s synthesizer music as all these bodies are just laid out across the hallway and the Daleks are just going through. It is very Stephen King. And it's like, wow. This is some of the most menacing we've ever seen the Daleks. And then at the end, the Doctor is dodging the Daleks' fire and dodging their guns, basically. And he flips this switch, and this switch just destroys the Dalek. And the scene is intense again, and there's all these explosions going off, and the Daleks are blowing up, going, exterminate! And they've had silly moments like that before, but this doesn't really feel that silly. There is one silly moment from episode 6, which is when the people walk away and the Daleks just turn to each other and go, they will be exterminated. I'm sure it's supposed to be menacing, but it actually ends up being kind of funny. Because it ends up feeling like a moment from The Office or something. But this moment at the end when they're all exploding, it's very intense. And I kind of like the little thing at the end there too. There are 2 moments at the very end when they wrap up things at the colony and the Doctor's walking away. There's 2 moments that I wasn't sure I liked before. One of them, as everything is wrapping up, is basically Polly saying to the Doctor, you weren't very convincing. You did know what you were doing, didn't you? And the Doctor's just like, like mischievous laugh. And then the other one is the Dalek, as the TARDIS is materializing, just raising its eye stalk. And none of the people in the TARDIS see it. But the Dalek just being like, yep, I'm still alive. So, as far as the Doctor being mischievous at the end, like implying that maybe he did some of this on purpose, I don't really mind that because they don't really give a definitive answer to that. The Doctor was very emphatically trying to get people to listen to him, so I don't think he was trying to get anyone killed because that's just not who the Doctor is. But I don't mind him being mischievous there. It's a little bit of comic relief after a lot of this destruction is taking place. And then the other thing with the Dalek raising its eye stalk, it's a good thing to keep people coming back. I mean, yes, it does kind of undermine the victory a little bit, but I don't mind that so much because maybe it's just because I have so much hindsight since this was 1966, but I really don't mind it because it does seem to sort of tease the Daleks' return, which I'm sure was there, and people always want to see more of the Daleks, and it does send one last chill down your spine as everything seems to be okay. And it's a nice little send-off right there. So, that story, Power of the Daleks, really good. Really good. Especially, in minor spoiler here for the next episode and what I'm going to be doing. The next episode is the Highlanders, the next story. And going from this to that is just so jarring. Because the Highlanders I consider to be one of the more boring Doctor Who stories that I just really have a hard time paying attention to and getting through. And indeed, I'm about halfway through the story, and I have never gone all the way through it, and I still have a hard time getting all the way through that. So, this story it functions really well. Every episode brings something new to the table, and the performances in here, I think the actor who plays Bragan is really good. The actor who plays Lesterson is excellent. The actor who plays Janely is really good. And, of course, the Dr. Ben and Polly, they're great in this. So, what would I give this story out of 10? I'm probably not going to be rating each one, but I would give it like a solid 8 or 9, I would say. As far as the animation goes, it is good if you want something to look at and you are used to Doctor Who animations. But I will say, a lot of the time, the punchier moments of the story, like those moments that really have a lot of punch, it takes a lot of those away. Because anything that's supposed to have a lot of momentum or force or speed to it, the animation is not going to do that very well, nor is it going to do very well those moments where people are kind of quietly contemplating and those subtle nuances with the face in the animation aren't very well done. That being said, I really do have to praise this animation team for what they did going back with the 2020 version. There are some genuinely great moments in the animation, and I still think it's one of the better ones they've done. But it still is kind of stilted. I mentioned in my previous review that the animation was really good, and it still is, but I think I hadn't watched the final episodes yet when I did that. I had just seen the original animation and watched like the first 4, and I just thought it was so good. But watching the conflict in the last episode, I really think it takes it away. The only moment it really doesn't take away as much is the slow pan with the dead bodies. That moment is still very creepy and very disturbing. It's like pure horror. It doesn't have as much of the Daleks in that scene. I would have preferred the Daleks just going past those bodies there. But that moment still does land very well, where you're just like, Jesus. So, if you want to experience the story and actually visually look at it, I would say experience it that way. But if not, if you don't mind listening to it in audio, if you haven't heard it yet, definitely listen to the Audible version, which is also on iTunes, which is linked with narration. I think by the actors who played Polly. I'm almost certain of that, but I could be wrong. A lot of times in those Classic Who animations, they will have, in those Classic Who audio versions, they'll have one of the actors that was actually in the story narrate the scenes and stuff. So, okay. Yeah, that's my review of Power of the Daleks. Really glad I watched this one. I'm really curious to know what I'm going to think when I get through the Highlanders. But, yeah. I really hope they find this one someday. I know it's not very likely. It's considered to be lost. But you never know. Maybe there's a copy out there that they didn't know they had somewhere. And it's sitting in the basement deep in some country you wouldn't expect. Maybe it's out there. And if that's the case, man, I would be so excited if that were the case. But yeah, Power of the Daleks, what did you think? And I will be back with my review of the Highlanders sometime soon. Hey guys, just a quick little addendum here. I forgot to add something. So, if you're a person who this affects, there are strobing lights in this animation. At least I know in episode 6 there are. I'm not sure if there are earlier in the animation, but this is for the 2020 animation. I'm sure maybe the 2016 animation does as well, but I just wanted to warn people about that because I forgot to say that in the episode, or in the review, as I forgot to say in there that specifically in episode 5, speaking about the actors again, the actor who plays Lesterson gives a very good performance, puts 110% into the freaking out thing in that episode, and it's so good, and it's not over the top in my opinion. I just don't usually see actors go that full into a performance when their character is supposed to be freaking out about something, and I really appreciated that. Both of those things I meant to say in this review, and I didn't, so I just wanted to add them here. But yeah, that's the last thing. So seriously, guys, until next time, have a great time with this episode if you watch it. And until I see you again, allons-y.